This is our second session of Group I. My name is Glenn McKnight, and my associate is Farrell Calderon is here together. And we're going to go through a session. This was Dr. Olivier Crepin-Leblanc, who was the ALAC chair. He's a very busy guy in Switzerland and also has contract work that he does in Turkey. But he could not make it today because there's the, 25th anniversary of ICANN celebration.
Yes.
Yeah, 2025. So he's doing a session with Urello, so he could not make this session today. So I'll do my best to, he gave me his slides, so we'll go through the slides. So let's just do some housekeeping before we start. Please mute your mics, close your video. This will reduce any noise in the background as well, and post all your questions and comments into the chat box. Okay, so this is part of our approach. We have the weekly live sessions. All the sessions are recorded. They're subsequently added to our Group I playlist, which we've given you the link here, and we'll put it into the chat as well, so you have it. I'll put it into the discussion thread this morning. I created a document with all the recordings. I think it's about 130 recordings of people that are in the ecosystem. We have some very distinguished people that were managed to achieve, and I'll talk about it in a minute, about the people we got for history. And we try to reserve about 15 minutes at the end of the session. This is a very long slideshow. So he's done about 60 slides, so bear with us. We'll also give you the slideshow. Alfredo, will you pop into the chat the ebook? So we try to put our material or slideshows and PDFs into our ebook fashion. You can download those at your convenience, and they're very easy to read, and they're agnostic in terms of technology. So bear that in mind. Now I want to talk about the next thing. It's the short surveys, and I reviewed the surveys a couple of days ago. And I'm astounded how many people are filling out the surveys and actually evaluating speakers that have not spoken yet. So each of the surveys, when it comes to the question of a particular person, in today's case, it'll be Olivier, but we're substituting for him today. That's the only person you're evaluating on. You click on his name, not all the other names. You're not evaluating all the other speakers because you haven't heard them yet. So bear that in mind. And your comments are more than welcome. We've got some great comments already from people. I won't address those right now, but we've discussed them privately, Alfredo and I, already this morning. Okay, this is the man that's supposed to be here today, but he's gone AWOL because honestly, he's speaking for the next 2 or 3 hours with Urello on actually 25th anniversary of ICANN. Now, he's an amazing person. He was the ALAC chair a few years back, very busy guy. And we're very fortunate to have him as one of our members of the VSIG Advisory Council. And he's actually been one of our speakers at our North American School of Internet Governance. He spoke in Montreal in 2018 at one of our events, and also the French version of our course we did concurrently with the English version in Montreal back in 2018. Great fellow, very, very approachable. So, and as he always says, please provide contact information to anybody who's interested. Okay, moving forward. Okay, it would be amiss for us not to acknowledge our sponsors. These are our sponsors, starting with the platinum sponsors, RIPE and PIR. Gold sponsors are PR from Puerto Rico, VeriSign, and Aaron or Gold. And then a silver level, Identity Digital, that used to be Affilius, Sira, Afronek, which was responsible for helping us convert our course into French, ICANN, and GoDaddy. Thank you all for supporting what we're doing. Okay, so I just want to do a shout out to our next speaker. It's Joe Capitano. Joe is assistant senior staff with the North American GSE. He works with the VP Aliaceres and is based in Washington. So he'll be talking about actors, and particularly focused because there's so many actors in the ecosystem, you're particularly talking about ICANN. And that will be Monday, September 25th. Okay, I hope you can see this slide. I didn't alter it. If you can't read it, it's the Internet Governance Current State and Future Perspectives. And it's by Dr. Vivek Blanc, and I'll assist with it. And we have our Twitter X contact as well. Okay, so the way Olivier approaches the phases of the evolution of internet governance, it goes with the first wave, which is DARPANET, which had a military focus. As you've been reading in our content, the history of the U.S. development of the early internet was for military function, so that the system would not break down, couldn't be circumvented. So between 1957 and 1970, that was the main focus. And then you had another phase that went right after that, or concurrent, is wave 2, which is the academic approach. And that's where the National Science Foundation, working with schools, and many of the people who we've had as speakers, Dr. Vince Cerf, Bob Kahn, and Steve Crocker, and Dr. Paul Wolf, all of those gentlemen were there at the very early part of the internet, and we have all the recordings in the past recordings and how that was developed at the very early stages. Next was the commercial stage from 1990 to 2000s, and one of the early female pioneers we have before she passed away was one of the great recordings we have. And sorry, Alfredo, her name, it jumps out of my head. Do you recall? You're muted, Alfredo. You're still muted.
Are you referring to Marilyn Cade?
I don't know why I forgot Marilyn, lovely lady, speaker at our NASIG events. Yeah, Marilyn Cade worked with Overstock. She worked in the business community and a real powerhouse. And if anybody was new at ICANN, she'd be the first one going up, shake your hand and say, introduce herself and actually make you feel comfortable. But she was one of the examples of the people that were at the early stages of the commercialization of the internet. Next is mass media, going from the early 2000s, and some of you remember some of the MySpace, for example, was an entity that was around and then disappeared. But early phases of mass media was occurred, and he's put in something called WSIS. I'm not sure why he put mass media and WSIS there, but WSIS was started in 2004. You had 2 events back to back, virtually, one in Paris, which was the first WSIS. That's a World Summit on International Science. And WSIS was started with a dedication to dealing with the how the not-for-profits are interfacing with this whole entity called the internet, and then it became IGF. But the next one right after that was in Tunis, and the next year after 2005. So wave 5, everybody and everything, was the next phase. So let's just go through the history. Okay, the technology developed since the 1960s, as we stated. Technical specifications was the venue of something called the IETF. When you look through the material, you'll see we have 2 categories, IETF and also IEB. You can learn a lot about what the IETF is, but they have something called the RFCs, and each of the protocols were developed and vetted through the IETF. The IETF was part of ISOC to relatively recent. When I was on the ISOC board, we hived off IETF to be its own independent organization. So IETF has meetings twice a year. I strongly recommend attending them. And if you can't attend them in person, go sign up. You can join remotely, and that does not cost you anything. So if you are particularly interested in the technology and the any particular RFCs, I strongly recommend looking into what the IETF does. And one of the other aspects of it, and it's true for IETF, was a multi-stakeholder development. And this is a big aspect of what ICANN is. And if you read through there is a number of people that are Marita Mole, for example, with Norello has been one of the biggest outspoken person on the concepts of multi-stakeholders. And if this is something you're interested in either case, let us know and we'll try to help you with directing you in the right direction. The other elements of the system, obviously, is the distribution system. This is the nuts and bolts, the network of networks. And again, the adage is no single owner of the internet. And that's absolutely true. We have the evolution of the DNS system, the domain name system, since 1980s. And, it's at the heart of what ICANN is. And it's a hierarchy of name servers with one single root, and it's fully distributed around the world. Okay, some of you may know this image. It's not a great image for you probably on the screen, but the exact same image is in the very first module, I think, right, Alfredo? And it, go ahead.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and it's I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but you can see it's fairly well laid out. Each of the players that are associated with, and that's getting back to the multi-stakeholder model. There's every aspect in the ecosystem of who's involved and how the end users feed into it.
Sorry.
That's okay. Okay, I believe I'm trying to think who sketched this out. This is in the back of a napkin, I believe. That was done either by Vince Cerf or Steve Crocker. But here we have a very simple configuration of, back in 1969, what the ARPANET network actually configured. And it was the first packet switching node for the ARPANET. There we go. Very first RFC. Remember what I was saying earlier with IETF? The first RFC was done by Dr. Steve Crocker. Dr. Steve Crocker was the chair of ICANN. He was chair of ARIN for a number of years. He's very active still. He's going to be a speaker at NASIG coming up in Puerto Rico in February. And he wrote the very first RFC in 1969. And again, RFCs are the standards used by the internet in terms of the protocols. Okay, another sketch of the internet timelines in 1971. And okay, one of our other speakers, and if I didn't mention it, an error of mine, very hard person to get as a speaker, but I managed to get him, is Bob Kahn. Bob Kahn and Vince Cerf at the time. Vint was at Stanford University in California. So in 1974, TCP/IP with just the IPv4 version. It's now the preferred version is V6, but this is the layout of what these guys conceptualized and then actually tested the protocol. And again, other versions of it as well, besides ARPANET, MILNET, WildNet, and SATNet. Okay, so what we have is the very early configuration of the domain name system was fairly limited. MIL for military, GOV for government, COM for commercial, NET for network, org for organization, EDU for education. And the predominant now domain name that we can see manifests itself, which is controlled by VeriSign, is .com. The other ones are utilized. I think there's over 10 million .orgs, and that's controlled by PIR. Okay, the military network separated, MILNET. MCI starts commercial email service on the internet. At that time, the rest of ARPANET internet was paid by the U.S. taxpayer, but not more than, but had more and more companies on it. And then from 80,000 nodes in January to 160,000 nodes in November. So it was growing fairly quickly as a system. But again, emphasizing this was funded by the US taxpayer. Okay, PSI, UUNet. I remember UUNet. I was my first domain name. I registered with them. ANS, CO, and RE are more commercial services started operation. So it started to proliferate in terms of who was doing the service. NSFNet, I mentioned NSF earlier on. That's the National Science Foundation in full development of the education network, which is still operation, with acceptable use policies began evolving and developing. Again, still the internet was very focused on the nuts and bolts and who was controlling it. The rest of the world started connecting itself via various different agreements and peering agreements. Okay, the CIX, Commercial Internet Exchange, created by signatories such as PSINet, UUNet, and SurfNet. The first neural exchange point bypassing of NSFNet backbone. It established the concept of exchanging traffic between commercial internet service providers, which is IXPs, which all of us undoubtedly use to get onto the internet. In fact, I actually was an investor in one of the IXPs in the early 90s. I'm not sure whatever happened to that. Internet services, email, FTP. As you remember, using all kinds of FTP protocols to upload your files for your web development. Gopher, interesting. I think no, Archie was one. Archie was developed by a chap who got the Internet Hall of Fame acknowledgement 2 years ago. I think he's from Barbados. So as I said, Gopher, BIOS, and Telnet. And that connects you to remote hosts. And all of this at this time, there's not a graphical interface. It wasn't even conceived yet, except someone was working on it, and we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so simple directories. Okay, remember I was saying it was all text-based and somebody was working on it? Well, here he comes. Sir Tim Berners-Lee. By the way, I tried to get him as a speaker. He's a tough one, but I didn't manage to do that. He invented HTML. That's your hypertext markup language. This opened the door to display text and pictures for the very first time. And I don't know about you folks or Alfredo. I remember using, I think, Mosaic 1.0 was a very through the Chicago servers, was the very first access I had, and it was a complete eye-opener. Mind you, it was really slow. I assume, Alfredo, you must have been working at the very first graphical interface at your local university in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, of course. We actually developed the first computer-based modules using HTML, and it worked really good.
So that was that a graphical interface when you
Yes.
did it? Yeah.
Yes, it was the first one in the island in chemistry of all courses. Yeah.
That ages you for sure.
Oh yeah.
Didn't Netscape come out of Mosaic and then it folded, right? So I think there was a relationship, but I can't remember. But okay, let's move on. Oh yeah, so there you go. It took pretty long for the page to load, and if you remember, Alfredo, it would start from the top and slowly move down till you saw the whole page. So this is an example of this is IBM's first page in 1994. So things moved fairly quickly. As mentioned, 1994, the web browser Netscape. I think Anderson was the chap that started Netscape. Then we had 94, the web crawler. Yahoo was incredibly popular as an email server and search engine. 1995, this is where things really start to heat up. And, basically Microsoft Internet Explorer, and that was a real killer on Netscape. Alta Vista was a pretty nice little search engine Ask Jeeves, I remember that too. That was from England. And then Google came around in 1998, and they purchased, which everybody thought they were crazy, how much they paid for YouTube at the time. Nobody could believe that somebody would pay the billions of dollars that Google did, but they did, and it turned out to be a good deal for them. So, not sure what he wants to show here. Do you surmise here what he's getting at? Asia. I'm not sure. I don't see a color bar on what he's trying to indicate here.
No, I don't see it either.
Okay, it could be, I assume he means the striped bars means internet connectivity, which skips most of Asia. And then moving 4 years later, the access was fairly extensive. That's what I'm surmising, what he's getting at. Okay, this is a very nice picture of the underwater cables that are connecting and we're seeing since this map, I think there's a really good map of ringing Africa with underwater cables as well, the increased access. But you could see the massive number of underwater cables going from Europe to North America. That's the most extensive link. And then you have the subsequent other links as well. Okay, so the end user perspective. Any type of traffic is allowed. And again, this is the one of the underlining concepts of the early developers of the internet, that things were not censored, and that there was a bit of a free-for-all in terms of access. And it's very much like a libertarian philosophy that the early end users, and we see things like in San Francisco called the Well as an example of that, free, open, which are core concepts that you see with free and open source software. So any type of traffic is allowed, no filtering. The end users have the choice of what service they want. They're champions for innovation, such as imagining the service, designing it, and offering it. Again, staying with the FOSS concept, no need to obtain a license, no need to apply for permission. The smallest startup company could become very successful. So there was a very short period of time at the early part of the internet where it was like a gold rush in many ways. And so there were opportunities abounding, and where people could actually access the internet from an entrepreneurial point of view. So let's talk about internet governance. And this is internet governance and geopolitics, histories, and principles of the ecosystem. So let's go through the definition from WGIG in 2005. The definition: internet governance is the development and application by governments, the private sector, the civil society, and the respective roles of shared principles, norms, rules, decision-making procedures, and programs that shape the evolution and use of the internet. So again, it's the multi-stakeholder model. Everyone in this definition have a role, they have a place, and they are part of the process of shaping what the internet is and how it's governed. Okay. Alfredo, is there any questions that I should address, or should I wait?
I don't see any questions, but I do have one since you bring it up. Glenn, I'm guessing you're going to touch on the evolution of the internet governance concept or definition, since lately some new developments have come up within the community.
Yeah, if I don't, let's circle back to it. So this was, and I was thinking the same thing as you were looking at this definition. It's probably appropriate for 2005 because this is right at the heels of WSIS that was done in Tunis. So yeah, let's make sure we pencil mark that, and we'll come back to it. Okay, this is from Diplo. Diplo has, anytime we use a graphic or we have a video or we have a material, we always document where it's from. We never say it's ours, right? But we have fair use for accessing materials, and so this is a fantastic graphic. And I'll have to ask Alfredo, is this graphic in our history section?
It's in the complementary resources, and it's part of the seventh edition of the Internet Governance book from Diplo Foundation.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so this is way too complicated for me to explain every level of this building, but what I want to emphasize is that everything fits together and it's a layering process. And you'll see in our course, we're following very much of the same thing. Now, obviously, we're dealing with the history now, but infrastructure, cybersecurity, legal, development, economic, social, cultural, human rights, all of those things. But we've also added, and this is what Alfredo was talking about earlier, the definition of internet governance and how it's changed. But we also have emerging technology. But you can see everything is intertwined as well. So let me move on. Various key organizations. And okay, it's hard to see that, but I'm not sure what, okay. Internet Society, founded by Vint Cerf in 1992, is a not-for-profit organization based in Virginia, founded on principles in leadership and internet-related standards, education, and policy, dedicated to ensuring the open development, evolution, and use of the internet for the benefits of people throughout the world, acts as a legal home for the IETF. Actually, that's not true anymore. It used to be, but we voted, as I said, I was on the board. It's its own entity. And the vision is internet is for everyone. So if you're not a member of your local chapter of ISOC, you can be an international member as well. Does not cost you anything in most cases, except Germany and Canada has a small membership fee. I don't think anywhere else has one. But if you're interested in particular topics such as rural development or women in science or security, there's a number of SIGs that are called special interest groups. You can actually join as well. So you're not limited to just being part of a chapter. And if there is no chapter in your country, why not create it? You just have to, there's a simple process of application for becoming a chapter. So we strongly recommend joining the Internet Society. And there's a bunch of benefits besides online education. Okay, so this is showing 120 chapters around the world. It's showing only one dot in Canada, but there's actually 3 chapters in Canada, and there's actually more in the United States as well than it's showing. So, but some come, some go. So roughly 120 chapters. Okay, I mentioned IAB quickly and IETF. So the Internet Architectural Board and IETF are both organizations at the heart in terms of standards for the internet. And again, I have to emphasize, if I'm going too quickly, Alfredo, I think you put the link in the chat for people to see this. They can grab the slideshow as an ebook, right?
Yes, I did. And I do want to mention, if you don't mind, Glenn, that in the next module, the actors of internet governance, we touch on each one of these organizations. We talk about their mission, the vision, and how you can seek more resources from each one of them. So be aware of that. If you see that Glenn is going rapidly through them, don't worry. We'll see them in details in the next module. Thank you.
Yeah, some of you may be ICANN fellows already. If you're not aware of fellowships that are available through Aaron, ISOC, ICANN, we try to post it. I think I mentioned at the last meeting, there's a calendar. If I see things that are a fellowship or a research research opportunity for some of you. I'll try to post as quickly as possible. You have to apply for these things. If this is something of interest for you, the benefits are just phenomenal. I've been involved with ICANN since 2009. I've done multiple positions throughout ICANN, and the contacts you make, and it's usually anywhere from 900 is very low to 3,600 people attend 3 meetings a year, and they're international, or you can do it remotely. So you need to delve deeper. Now you're going to learn a lot more. I'm not going to go into detail on ICANN right now because Joe Capitano is going to be speaking next week. Okay, so you have anatomy of a domain name. So there's different levels, as you can see in this graphic. It's showing each of the 3 levels of the domain name. Okay, so let me go on to root servers. The RARs are ARIN, AFRINEC, RIPE, NCC, LACNIC, APNIC. So there's 5 RARs. So the DNS root name servers reliably publish the content of one file called a root zone file. The file is the apex of a hierarchical system called the domain name system, which is used by almost all internet applications to translate worldwide unique names like isoc.org into identifiers. The DNS is used by the web. So here's example where the root servers are located. Okay, as of September 2023, 1,751 instances of root server systems. RARs oversee the allocation of the registration of internet numbers resources with a particular region of the world. And so an example, you may have seen this, instead of seeing the names, you'll see the numbers, like such as this one, 192.0.0.1. All of the RARs form the number resource organization called the NRO. So I mentioned it just a minute ago, what the 5 organizations are, and here they are. And again, they have fellowships as well. So if those who are quite interested in attending these meetings, take the time to go to their websites and look it up.
Probably, Glenn, it's worth mentioning that for the last couple of years, one of these RIRs has run into some issues, specifically AFRINIC. And I think we shared the announcement that a couple of weeks ago, they were under judiciary responsibility due to the difficulties they've been running into. And that has impacted the end users in Africa and some other parts of the world that have some IP addresses assigned by AFRINIC. Just wanted to put that in the mix. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the board members from ARIN, who was a board member with ICANN, gave us a really good talk on the whole issue of what happened legally with the lawsuit from what happened, which actually hamstrung AFRINIC. I'll try to find that recording for folks, but there's a very good article, I believe, in Circle ID on this whole issue. I'll try to put it into the discussion thread today. Okay, time is running quickly, so let me run through this. Okay, let's talk about the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C. There's member organizations as well as full-time staff, and they set web standards. W3C, I believe they all, no, the WCAG is a different standards group, and that's to deal with accessibility issues. Okay, the lead web inventor, Tim Berners-Lee, and their CEO, Jeffrey Jaffe. I will try again, maybe in January, and I'll see if Tim would like to join us as a speaker. But he's been not the most cooperative, but I'll try it again. Okay, this is a bit of a problem for me. I don't know about you, Alfredo, but I never understood why the ITF, which was around since 1865 with telegraphs and was around with telephones, and man, they were big Geneva-based organization that understood the whole concept of communication, but they seemed to be asleep at the switch when it came to the internet. They didn't seem to pick this stuff up as you would have thought they should have. So as a result, ICANN's a dominant player in this, and it almost like out of nowhere. But technically, ITU should have been there like a natural organization, but it didn't happen. Not sure why. I have some suspicions, but you can't ignore many of the aspects of the evolution of the internet in terms of international regulations without thinking about ITU. Again, this is their structures. You can see what their radio conference, like, you could tell by just the identification of their groups. They have a conference, for example, here's one, the WCIT in Dubai. As an example, you can click on the link to the event. I attend a lot of ITU events. I think they've done some remarkable stuff on AI in the last few months. A couple of their lead people with ITU have really become quite formative in terms of internet access into different countries, and you've done some fantastic work on the impact of internet shutdowns in countries and the economic impacts. So it may have been slow at the start, but I think they're picking up their game in the last few years.
Oh yes, I have to agree, Glenn, with that statement. And actually, the president right now is the first North American person who is leading ITU, and she's all over the world visiting prime ministers, presidents of different nations to incorporate the latest developments of the internet, since their philosophy is to have internet for everybody, as ISOC and other organizations have stated.
Yeah, she was our keynote speaker at our North American school in Washington because she was busy. It was a recording, but she's a big supporter of what we're doing with VSIG and NASIG. Let me move on. Okay, the planning pot, as they call it, it's a must go for ICT decision makers. A lot of seminal people within civil society as well as government make it a go-to location to be at. Okay, so let's just talk about the United Nations processes. I mentioned WSIS earlier, morphed. So we have the IGF, that's going to be in Japan this year in October. It was in Berlin last year and Poland the year before that. They have Commission on Science and Technology, UNCTAD, UNESCO. Very good papers by UNESCO, by the way, especially on gender issues in terms of the digital divide. The UN General Assembly, and we have and I mentioned numerous times, they organized WSIS. Okay, WSIS plus 10. My wife was at that event on gender issues in Paris, I believe. She was there for that event. And again, they have the thing about what WSIS said. It had particular areas. We did the WSIS in the first year. We had 32 people at our event, and when we did in 2004, and we were promoting Linux and open source certification around the world. Okay, let's talk about the IGF. I think Alfredo, you and I and Eduardo were in Guadalajara, right? That was at the IGF.
Yes, we were.
And that's where we said, hey, there's no North American School of Internet Governance. So it was after meeting a bunch of people doing, and at that time I think there was only two schools, maybe Wolfgang School in Germany and Olga's in Latin America at that time. But the IGF is a multi-stakeholder platform that facilitates the discussion of public policies pertaining to the internet. And the beauty of the IGF is they have open calls for papers. So all these papers, I think there was 200 and 300 papers submitted. So if you are interested in submitting a paper to IGF, you can. And they go through a process of evaluation, it's peer reviews, and you may be a speaker. You don't have to physically be there. You can do it as a remote presentation. Okay, so in addition to the annual IGF, there is national and regional IGFs. Alfredo, did you do an IGF in Puerto Rico?
No, we haven't done one in Puerto Rico, but we're working on it.
Yeah, the IGF USA is based in Washington. That's usually in July. I don't think it happened this year, believe it or not, because I was monitoring that and I didn't see evidence. The Canadian one is fairly soon, in the next couple of weeks, and that's going to be in Montreal. And some of the regional ones are very much more active. So this gives you a picture of, and again, if you're interested in internet governance as a long-term career, you have to put it on your calendar to be attending the IGFs. And anyone from the global south can apply for a fellowship. Anyone from the global north cannot. So just that's a little bit of preference, which is good. You know, I don't have a problem with that. Okay, multilateral versus multi-stakeholder. Okay, multi-stakeholder. It's an environment where decisions are taken in consultation with government, business, civil society, individual users, and any other stakeholder not covered in the above. Okay, now in contrast, what is multilateral? No cross-community discussion, government to government speak to each other, business speaks to business, civil society speaks to each other. Governments make decisions. They may ask for the advice from business or civil society, but may invite them input from business or civil society. So it's a different communication style. Okay, why is multi-stakeholder better? Well, early engagement of all the actors. So some of you may have been involved in this process. It's critical. You basically think of things that should be implemented in the policy, and to do a policy. Then after, oh, we forgot to be inclusive for a certain group, or we forgot that internet access in the far north or tribal lands is a problem. So if you have those people at the table and they bring up the issues at the early stages, you can prevent potential problems. By engaging everybody in the discussion, decisions are more legitimate. Difficulty is need to reach consensus. Like some of the people who should be at the table because of their lack of funding or access to when these meetings are happen. So there, it's not always inclusive. So it may look like sometimes, but it becomes a serious problem sometimes in terms of getting the voice of everyone. Okay, this is something I've been researching a lot on, looking at doing a paper with professor in Oxford, Yik Chin Chan, and Perry Astafari. We're doing stuff on internet fragmentation. Interesting concept. Perry did a session at ICANN in Kuala Lumpur on internet fragmentation. We know it as the Great Wall of China, or what's the Russian internet, or the activities where the countries are saying we want control. So regulation by so many governments, such as what we have in, say, parts of India, where we have internet shutdown for geopolitical reasons. And again, that's a control thing. Encryption to allow or not to allow. Cybersecurity in an increasing connected world is an issue. We have another issue in terms of privacy or data governance, 5G, Internet of Things, and others. Alfredo, is there anything else missing in this challenge list?
Oh, not really. It's okay.
Okay. Okay. He's got this list again. Okay. Okay, I'm going to skip this due to time. The response of several governments, again, it gets deeper into the weeds. I'll let you guys read that yourself. Some of the tools that are being manifest in terms of dealing with issues, ISOC has created something called Manners, M-A-N-R-S. Go to manners.org, go to ICANN site, you can look it up. Again, there's various different tools of dealing with many of these issues. And no, wow, that's fantastic. So there he is. On behalf of Olivier, he says thank you, and I say thank you, and Alberto says thank you. So let me turn back to the questions and ask if anyone has anything to ask. And again, we've given into the chat the link to the slideshow, and this recording will be made available fairly shortly. We put it into the list. And I think, Alfredo, you put the link to all the recordings, right?
Yes, I did, and I'm placing it again right now.
Okay. Okay, so what do we have here in terms of questions?
I don't see any questions. If somebody has any question, you can raise your hand and we'll give you the mic so you can ask your question.
Okay, thank you, David. David says no questions. Yeah, this is everything has a history. I'm going to give you some insights from a book Alfredo and I read recently. It's by Dr. Ben Alfredo. What's his last name? The Internet for All writer.
Tarnoff.
What's his name?
Yeah, I think it's Tarnoff. T-A-R-Noff.
Oh, Tarnoff. I was hoping to have when I was first looking at this module, is to have a contrarian perspective. I would have Olivier having a perspective on the evolution, that a very seamless approach, and then the NSF gives away the rights, the keys to the internet to ICANN, and everyone's happy. Or Ben Tarnoff's perspective, say, wait a second, they gave away everything. They gave the keys to the kitty jar sort of thing, as they express. So Ben Tarnoff's book is very interesting. And Cory Doctorow is another one that came out recently. Again, very critical of the where the internet is going in terms of its history, which has become not only more commercial, it's become less abiding to the guiding principles that was first started, which was much more people-friendly, much more non-commercial, much more on the principles of free and open source software. So thank you, Alfredo. He just posted Internet for the People, the Right of the Digital Future by Ben Tarnoff. In fact, I will find Ben did a talk for the Libraries Without Borders group. In fact, if you guys take a little bit of effort to look him up, you'll come across some interviews with different organizations, and it doesn't take much. You don't have to read the book if you listen to a couple of the recordings of his perspective, but clearly he believes what happened with the NSF, that was a mistake. And he's coming up with a principle that we have to return to the principles before the NSF sale of the internet. So I'm just making a comment on that. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong, but there is always two versions of history, and usually the version of history is to the victor. So that's basic, and that's my view. So I'm just looking if there's any other comments or questions. Oh, okay, so if everybody could finish the quick survey. Make sure you do the pull down. Don't evaluate everybody's speaker because you haven't heard them. The only person you're evaluating today is me as a substitute for Olivier. And if you're interested, when you look at the content, you'll see Olivier's recording from what he's done with us before. So feel free to reach out to him as well. Thank you so much for coming today, and I'll pass it over to Alfredo.
Thank you, Glenn, for that presentation. It was thorough. We, in the next few modules, doing a deep dive into each one of the topics that Glenn mentioned and through the organizations as well. We'll have some questions there for you so that we can have some kind of conversation on different organizations and what they do, and if they're doing something in your part of the woods, in your country, so that you can share it with the rest of the group. I do want to let you know, as Glenn mentioned, we publish announcements constantly. We use the calendar tool to share with you future events. So watch out for that, click on that, and if you're interested, most of them are free. You can join them virtually, or in some cases, there are events that are happening in your country that you might be able to drop in and participate actively in those as well. So having said that, thank you all for your participation and for listening what we've said. We'll see you next week. Bye
Bye,
to
everybody.
all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.